Okay, so hi everyone, and first of all, I'd like to thank Paul for putting out this event at this quite fantastic venue. It's quite impressive. I've been to many conferences before, and this is probably the best one I've been so far. So thank you also for inviting me here today to talk a bit about how we at CERN are using Activiti to automate business processes across the entire organization. So my name is Silva, and I'm a software engineer working for CERN's Advanced Information Systems group. What we do at this group is we develop all the corporate information systems that support all the key business areas across the organization. So basically, running CERN as a business. And the agenda for today, before I start with workflows and Activiti, I'll speak a bit about business computing at CERN, so the non-physics aspect of computing at CERN. Then I'll move on to our long history of workflow engines at CERN. So we started at around 1992, so long before I joined CERN, with a custom-made workflow system developed in C, backed by an Oracle database, and then fast forwarding to 2015 with Activiti, and I'll finish with some of the monitoring and tools we use to debug and monitor our workflows. So first, with sort of context about CERN, I promise will be very quickly. So CERN was founded around 61 years ago, and it was one of Europe's first joint ventures. We have around 21 member states. Our budget is around 1 billion Swiss francs, and we have a staff of around 2,500. But perhaps the most important part of these numbers are actually 12,000 distinct scientists which come to CERN every year to collaborate in our scientific program. These people come from all over the world, from more than 100 countries, to work with us. And it was partially because of this that Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web back in 1999 to allow geographically distributed teams to communicate. And of course, when you hear about CERN, you tend to hear about the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider. It's this 27 kilometers tunnel which you see in the picture there. It sits astride the Franco-Swiss border next to Geneva in Switzerland. And inside, we accelerate protons at near the speed of light, which are then collided or smashed together inside these huge detectors. The TT team had the pleasure, I think, to go there last year to do these installations. And recently, last week, we broke the record of the highest energy human-made collisions ever made at 13 TeV as the LHC restarted for the second season, and after some upgrade and maintenance work. So this is all about CERN. I promise it was quick. So I'll move now to the business computing part of CERN. So that was the headline act. CERN, such as any large organization, has tons of administrative procedures, things like hiring people, firing people, managing vacation, training, etc. So people come, they do the job, they come back to their home institutes, and they don't want to have to worry about all these administrative procedures, legal restrictions that exist in organizations such as CERN. So, enter business computing in the group that I work for, Advanced Information Systems. This is a snapshot, just to give you an idea of the range of activities that are covered by the group that I work for. So we cover all the big business domains. Everything has to do with HR, so hiring, firing, or retiring, whatever you want to call it. And everything in between, everything to do with payments, material management, so we have a material management system. We have an on-site store with around 80,000 items which we have to manage. We deal with all the safety procedures. We have a medical service on site as well. We deal with medical data, infrastructure things, basic things like the phone book of the organization, public outreach. We have around 80,000 visitors every year. We have to manage when they come to CERN, for example, which bus is going to take them, which tables to reserve in the restaurant, and all those kind of things. Also reporting to EU, so of course we are funded by the member states, and we have very strict requirements to report to European Union. So, we cover pretty much all the business domains. So, hiring people, HR, paying, material management, logistics. Of course, we are an organization which not only, we physically actually are in 2 countries, so we are actually in France and Switzerland. So we have to take care of things like even if the man who cuts the grass, he has to worry that the French grass has to go to French waste, and the Swiss grass has to go into Swiss waste, and there are tons of custom forms that have to be filled automatically to make sure all this runs smoothly. So that's kind of all our business domains. It's basically running CERN as a business. That's our main goal for our group. And It's not physics, it's everything else to keep the organization running. And to deal with all these things, we have developed a system called EDH, stands for Electronic Document Handling. And this is the system, the workflow system, which is basically a web form, a workflow running an activity, and then a bunch of interfaces to all the ERP systems and the finance HR, which exists across the organization. So at the moment, we cover around 60 official procedures from all the areas I mentioned before, so things such as safety, procurement, finance, HR. We process around 360,000 documents per year and over 750,000 electronic signatures. This system was developed in-house in 1992, and since then we've been basically putting more and more administrative processes as we transform our organization from paper-based to completely electronic-based. So, to give you a best idea on how to understand how EDH works, I'll just give you some case studies. So in this case, it's an end-to-end process from purchase to pay. So this is the front page of EDH desktop. I know it looks a bit old-fashioned, but that's what we have right now. And let's buy something, and for that we need to create a material request. So it's one of the 60 different procedures we have around CERN to do all kinds of things. And in there, as you can see, it's a basic form, and we can select one of our suppliers to which we have a B2B agreement. So we can go to their catalog, we can punch out their catalog using a standard industry standards for that. We can select what you want to buy. In this case, let's buy a mouse, but it could be anything you can imagine. So it could be an FPGA for some integrated board inputs and detectors, cables, copper, anything you can imagine could be bought from these procedures. You select the items, and then you are brought back to our system, EDH, with your item there, and with the price, which is the negotiated price that CERN has. Then afterwards, you fill in some data. So, for example, where do you want your items to be delivered, and when, some comments, and which budget code should you use to pay for this particular item. Once you do that, you approve the document, you send it, and from that moment on, we spawn a workflow process. You probably recognize this from Eclipse Designer of Activiti. So this is the process which runs for approving and transferring a particular material request. And once we get everything approved, we send the order to the supplier, to our ERP system, which then sends the order automatically to our supplier through CXML and other industry standards. They then send us the invoice, we automatically scan them, we integrate in our ERP. Oops. Nope. Wait. Just spoiled the surprise now. Alright. So yes, we integrate the invoice into our system automatically. Then when the goods are delivered, we automatically integrate them into our logistics systems, which then process by finance. We deliver the item directly to the user's office or wherever the location he decides that this wants to be delivered to. And then we automatically pay the supplier. So in the meantime, the person who placed the order can also see how things are going, so they can check the invoice, they can check the order which we sent to the supplier, and we also have some sort of decision support systems which allow someone to see where they're spending their money, if they have any money left in the budget code, what's the pipeline for that budget code, which suppliers are we spending the money with and when, all those kind of things you can do with business intelligence systems. And the good thing about these is that all of these are end-user tools, so they don't need to go to someone in finance to ask, okay, how much money do I have available in my budget code? This is completely self-service. They just go here, and like this, they can be self-sufficient from the first day they arrive at the organization. So this is an overview of the EDH architecture. At its core, it's essentially a web-based, well, a server-based web application. And then we have several different modules around there. So for example, on the left, you can see the scripts and jobs. That's where you have, for example, our indexer. We use Oracle text for doing full text search. Then we have extraction. This is because most of the data which we use at this system comes from external systems. So for example, if you want to see person information, we don't actually have them in our system. We extract them every night from our HR systems, and then we synchronize over the day whenever new persons arrive at the organization. We also have this system interface you see there at the bottom. And this is the part which integrates with all the receiver systems. So for example, if you want to integrate with our ERPs or financial systems, we have interfaces for that. Normally they're pretty much done to database links because we at our group, we manage all these systems, so they're all running Oracle databases, so we can easily communicate with them and not have to worry about dealing with distributed transactions, for example. And then to the right, this is the part where I'll focus right now. This is the workflow bit, and I'll be focusing about it on the next few slides. So BPA at CERN. So these are the core concepts of our workflows. Our workflows are human-centric. So our processes that you'll see can be seen as a sort of a collector of signatures. Someone who needs to approve your document for it to flow. And a signature itself is implemented as a business process, and it can be viewed as a sort of super implementation of activities in BPMN's user task. It's something you assign to someone and it's to approve or reject for you to move forward in the workflow. And it's also role-based, so we never assign a signature to anyone. This is because we have a huge turnover of people at CERN, and we have to assign this to roles. So for example, if the team leader of the CMS experience was hard-coded in our processes, once every year when it changes roles, this will be no longer a valid signature. So of course, we always assign this to roles. So this is team leader, and then the secretaries, when the new team leader arrives, they are the ones who automatically define all these roles for us. It's also non-blocking, so as you saw before, we also manage the leave system. So we know exactly whenever someone is absent or not. So when we assign a signature to someone, if that person is absent, what we do is we escalate the signature to the person above or across this person in the organization. And then the other cornerstone of our workflows is a transfer process, which I'll also show afterwards. This is the part we integrate with our receiver system. This is the part where we either call a stored procedure database, and we transfer our data to a different system. So these are the two cornerstones of our workflows that you shall see in a few slides. Also, one of the main goals that we have is also to streamline processes. So for example, we don't ask for a signature if the person has already signed before. Suppose you have two different roles in a particular workflow. You are both the supervisor of someone and you are responsible for the budget code of a particular purchase. Then, if you signed in the first step, you don't need to sign in the second one, since you signed before, of course. We also don't need to ask for signatures if someone with sufficient rights has already signed before. So, for example, if I signed as the group leader, and then afterwards I need to sign a document which is up to 10,000 francs, and if I have a right to sign that amount of money, then I also need to sign again. So the workflow is smart enough to recognize which roles were already signed before. So how do you integrate this with EDH? Here's a typical workflow which I saw before. So we spawn a process once you put the send button. We spawn this workflow process here. And then while the document is being processed, we show these info lines in here. This is probably the steps in the workflow. So for example, in there you can see that the creator was me, so I approved the documents. Then the document went to my supervisor, Staff Teach-Off. And from then on, you put on all the info lines in there to show up what's going on in the workflow. Then, of course, we have the task list, the user's in-tray, where you can see which documents are assigned to you, which documents you need to sign, etc. So as you can see there, you can see, for example, 5 documents, things such as training requests, claim from someone who went to a conference in Bath, French courses, you name it, we have a process for that. So another example for workflow, this is from a monitoring system, so it's a fire permit. And the fire permit is the official procedure which must be taken whenever you do any kind of work which might involve fire. So any kind of welding or using a blowtorch. Those kind of things require fire permits, and we require several people to approve these before it takes place. And another process used by CERN, when you leave the organization or when you're about to leave, we need to review your appointment expiration to see if you actually terminate your contract, if we renew or do something else. And you see lots of those signs in there. These signs are the signature process which I mentioned before. This is essentially a user task. Final one, material request you saw before, and again, all the tasks there that you see are the signature task. So it's blocking, and it goes there, and it waits for someone to sign before it advances in the workflow. So a bit more about the signature process. This is, as I said, role-based evaluation of signatures, so we cannot hard code names, we must use roles. So for example, you have there the group leader of a particular group at CERN. This then gets evaluated at runtime to the particular person who at the moment of the creation of the workflow is the group leader of that department. We have the safety officer for particular buildings. We also have this notion of pools, which is essentially a group of people. And we have also rights, so for example, the right to sign a material request up to 5,000 euros or Swiss francs on the SMS experience budget code. We have as well automatic escalation of signatures. As I said before, if someone is absent, we need to escalate this to a person which is higher in the hierarchy or across in the hierarchy. Or if the signature expires, because we don't want the process to be stuck with someone for quite a long time, we also expire the signature and move on to the next person in the hierarchy so that he or she can sign the document for him. Ad hoc workflow, this is quite an important feature for us. This is essentially the ability for a user to forward the document to anyone, and that someone who has forwarded the document can also forward to anyone else. So effectively what to create here is an ad hoc workflow. So within all the other workflows you saw before, you can create your own workflow if you feel that someone else needs to see or approve the documents. Finally, we support the notion of exclusion lists. This is the notion of conflict of interest. So for example, suppose you are the group leader of something, of a group, and you want to buy a Mac or a phone, and your deputy group leader has the same rights as you. So, of course, I can just send a document and ask my deputy to sign for me, because he has the same rights. This will be a conflict of interest, because he's on the same level as you in the organization or below. And this actually happened at CERN. So there was someone who bought a phone for personal use, and he asked his deputy to sign for him. The deputy didn't find it very interesting, so he complained about this, and that's why, in the end, we had to implement such functionality in our workflow system. So I'll talk about rules. How does it work? So we always assign to a role, never to a person. These rules are hierarchical, so you can see there how they are maintained. You can be the group leader, and then you have associated financial rights by being the group leader. So we automatically give to you some roles based on some other roles you might have in the organization. You can also define levels of delegation. So for example, even though you are by default required to sign all the financial documents up to a certain amount, you can say that, okay, I don't want to sign these documents, I want to delegate them to someone else. And within each right, you can have multiple persons to do escalation. And you can define priorities, of course, to see which one signs first, which one signs last. And all of this is managed by the departments. So we don't need to touch this. We just define the rights and the roles in our workflows. And everything is managed by the department's planning officers, which configure all of these depending on who leaves or not the organization. So yeah, another notion of our workflow is this idea of a pool, and a pool is essentially a group of persons. So if you notify a pool, you inform everyone within that particular pool, and any member of the pool can also take the document. So this is to avoid having multiple persons working on the same document at the same time. So what we do is, the document is with the pool, then you can take the document for you, sort of lock the document, and then you can work on it, or you can put it back into the pool so that someone else can take it. This is also dynamic, so we have another application which is called eGroups. This is sort of a layer on top of LDAP, which allows people to configure all kinds of groups for serious things like CMS technical infrastructure team, or even something like the Pint Club, which is a group that normally go for Friday beers. And yeah, it's completely managed by users, of course, and again, we like this, we avoid having to change our workflows every time something changes in the organization. So aside from the signature, another critical task we have, as I mentioned before, is the transfer task. The transfer task is essentially a Java service call with integrates to different systems. This is typically done through PL SQL, again, because we are fortunate enough, or unfortunate, but everything we have in our systems are Oracle interfaces, and they're all managed by the same group, by the same people. So if you want to transfer something from EDH to in our ERP system, we don't need to handle all the distributed transactions by us. Oracle does it for us. It's really, really handy, because then we can transfer to an ERP1, then this ERP1 transfer to ERP2, and if something goes wrong, everything gets rolled back in the same transaction, whereas if you want to cleanse this by yourself, You have to deal with complicated stuff like two-phase committing and all this kind of things. So this is all managed transparently for us by Oracle. We also get feedback from the receiver system. So the lines you see there are the workflow-based lines that we generate in our system. And then we have the other side, which is, so in this case, Qualiac, it's in ERP. And you can see there that what's the status of your purchase order, who is being handling your purchase order, etc. Then we have the notification service. So one of the signature parameters that we have is a mail template that is used to basically send an email to someone to alert him that he has or she has to sign a particular document in the workflow. For this, yeah, we initially started to use mail tasks, but they're quite simple for what we want to accomplish because we want to have things like internationalization. We want to have the option of single or digest emails. So, for example, some people get 1-2 emails every month. Some people get literally hundreds of emails per day. And for those people, they don't want to receive individual mails all the time during the whole day. So what they want is, they want to receive a digest email which compiles everything together and sends to them, okay, you have 100 documents to pay attention to today, and you can have a look at them tomorrow. This is the list that you have to look into. And yeah, we implemented a small templating language. It's using Groovy DSL to allow you to put text and all these kind of expressions inside that mail template, and of course supports multiple language because CERN is a bilingual organization, so our official language are French and English, and that's why we have to care about all those things. Then we have as well some monitoring and debugging tools. We have this notion of stuck documents. A stuck document is a document in our workflow which cannot move forward, not because someone is blocking it, but because there was an error in the workflow. It could be, for example, that there's a bug in the workflow, we screw up, there's something wrong in there. It could be because there's no one to sign, so as you saw, all these roles you have there, sometimes there can be a delay between the time that someone leaves the organization and the time that someone configures a new role for a new person who arrives at the organization. And if the workflow is going to that step in the meantime, it's going to get stuck in there. So we identify those issues and then we list them and contact the persons or email them automatically so that they can fix and define the roles that the workflow can advance. We can also have data extraction problems, so people sometimes get attached to wrong units. This is Oracle HR issues sometimes, or transfer problems. So we have lots of different transfers to many different receiver systems, and sometimes they fail. Sometimes it could be wrong parameters because of us. Sometimes it could be a valid data. Sometimes they were already transferred before because they were updated manually in the target system and they're being transferred again. All kinds of these things. So you have also a tool which I'll show you afterwards to help us identify all these issues. So a bit of a workflow history very quick here. So we started in 1992, so again, long before I joined CERN. But it was written in C. The person who wrote it is still at the organization, is my boss. And it was made with, in C with an Oracle database on the backend. And yeah, it was a bunch of if-else rules to define which step you would follow afterwards. So essentially a state machine. Then in 1998 we changed to Oracle Workflow. This was a very good product by Oracle. It was proprietary, but it was quite nice. But then the product changed to Oracle People. We ran into some issues migrating it, and we had to change for something else. And at the time, in 2006, we looked into a solution called Activiti, again, using the People specification, and which we were being used up until 2013, when Activiti, or at least the version which we used, reached end of life, so we were at the point where we had to decide what to do next. So there are three candidates that we did some research on. One of them was the new version of Activiti. So Activiti was bought by Informatica, and we explored to migrate to Activiti. Then there was Oracle VPN, it's a part of the Oracle Fusion middleware stack. And there was this new one as well, called Activiti. It was rather small at the time, but I think quite powerful. And we were exploring these three solutions. We actually didn't manage to install Oracle VPN. It's quite hard to install. So yeah, that was quite dropped, and in the end we decided to go for Activiti, which we are using since the end of 2013 more or less. So why we choose Activiti? Well, it's open source, very large community. active forums, frequent releases, and simple enough. So we can actually see what's going on in Activiti, contrary to all the other ones we explored. We have no idea what's being done in the ActiveOS or even less with Oracle workflow. It's lightweight, so we like the idea that all it takes to set up a process engine is to embed just a jar file, right? So with all the other ones, you have to put all these massive containers, WebLogic stuff, and make it run there. And with Activiti, it's just a Java. We can just run a daemon, a Java daemon, with class path with Activiti, and everything runs just smoothly. BPMN 2.0, so we realized a bit later that people was not a good fit for our business processes. So our business processes are mostly human-centric, and people is standard mostly for system orchestration, for integrating systems. So lots of concepts there are very hard for users to understand, and we couldn't just use any diagram from people to show to the users. They could not possibly understand what was going on there. There was too many of impedance mismatch there. And BPMN is quite a good fit because it's more focused towards human-centric workflows, and we actually sometimes allow the user to sketch the process for us, and then we build on top of that to construct the final workflow. Java, of course, so at CERN and in general in IIS, the group that I work for, we are a Java house, so everything is written in Java, so of course it felt natural to use a product like Activiti, which was developed in Java. Spring as well, so we're fans of Spring as well as CERN, so having Spring on top of the engine was also the cherry on top of the cake. And unit tests, quite important as well, because up until this point, we were doing lots of screw-ups that sometimes we had a request to change the workflow, and we were moving some flow around there or putting some extra condition, and we just introduced some regression errors into place. We had no easy way to test our workflows. And with Activiti, we can just use regular Java-based frameworks like JUnit to test our workflow. This is quite a nice thing to have. And as you shall see later, we have lots of new tests, and I don't recall last time we introduced the regression error into our workflow. When we migrated, some of them had some errors in the beginning, but after we fixed them, we put a unit test, and it's very rare, but I don't recall ever having to fix regression error. So how do we do migration? What we did was, doing a big bang migration was quite hard, so what we did was we put two engines running in parallel. So for this, we have a queue, of course, which sends to each different engine depending on the development type, let's say. We also took the chance to re-engineer the processes and optimize them while doing so. So we didn't just migrate and copy-paste the steps from your workflows. We contacted the business owners of the particular process, to ask what can be improved, what are the typical use cases, what are the typical flows that these documents follow, and let's try to improve this and make it a better process. So far, the statistics are, we have, out of our 60 business processes, we have around, well, we have 46 migrated, like yesterday, we checked up, and this accounts for around 90% of the total volume of documents in EDH. We have still 14 documents migrated. They are low volume documents, but they're quite hard to migrate, and yeah, we're doing some sprint now to finish them up. We also started to, there's also some interest around CERN to use our workflow system, to use Activiti as their workflow system. So we have as well now some external documents for systems such as control and monitoring and planning that are using Activiti to manage their own workflows. And in total we have around 800 unit tests for all of the documents we have so far. So the workflow architecture, as you can see there, more or less 4 layers. So we have the EDH layers, the web part, and we have the sign screen, the thing you saw where you put your password on. And once you sign, what happens is your document is sent to a queue. The queue is a custom-made queue written in Perl. No particular good reason. I guess if we were to do it now, we would use something more modern, but it's why it's there. And then we have a compatibility layer. It's something we built on top of Activiti to abstract away a bit the Activiti APIs. Then we have, of course, Activiti at its core, and we have implemented a few processes in there, such as the signature, transfer, etc. I'll show you some of them afterwards. And then we have some tools. So we have the designer tool, also part of Activiti. We use the Eclipse designer for that. Some monitoring, which is a custom-made tool, and the notification service, which is the thing which processes all the mails to send and to digest at the end of the day. So how does it start in our workflows. So every workflow starts with the root process. This is the sort of the parent process of every business process in our CERN. And this is where we have, let's say, the catch-all reject handlers, as you can see there, and all the common boilerplate parts which are shared across all the processes. So, for example, if you want to cancel a document, you don't want to put that thing and in every sub-process. What you do is you put in the global one, and every sub-process will automatically have that functionality. So like this, we avoid repeating this logic for every business process. Then from this, we call the actual business process. There's a step there, start document process, to which we call the particular business process. In this case, the material request, for example. And then, as I said before, this is just a bunch of signatures. And the signature itself is yet another process, as you can see there. So if I zoom in on the signature, this calls another business process with these parameters here. So it defines the role, in this case it's the flammable gas safety officer. We define the target, so it's the officer for this particular department, and as well the replacement, which are in this case the deputy of the fire flammable gas officer. Then this is the signature process itself, and what we do here is a sort of a four-step procedure. So the first thing we do, it's small there, it's we parse and evaluate the expression that we use there. So for that we have developed our own grammars using Antler version 3 parser, and then we evaluate our expression based on the results of that grammar. So once we evaluate the expression, we get the person, the ID of the person to which we need to assign the documents. Then we go to a wait step where we're waiting for the person to actually accept or reject the workflow or something else. Then we process the user action. As I said, the most common scenarios are approve and reject, but for example, you can send back the document to the previous person, you can forward it to someone else to create this sort of ad hoc workflows within your workflow. It can be expired, can be postponed, you can use a pool, all those kind of things. And then at the end, we either approve normally or reject the document. You might notice that the reject is not really an output parameter. It's in fact an error end event. And this is because we want to prevent handling rejects on all possible states in the workflow. So I put this in an error end event. We just put it once, and we don't have to deal with all these flows here, because by default, if you have a signature, the default flow is approved. So you want to move forward if the document was approved. That's why you don't see all the rejects. If I showed you, for example, how the people look like, it was a reject for every particular box you have in your workflow. So at the end, it was a massive spider in your workflows, which you could not see anything. We also have a small thing there, which is skip logic, and this is used to inform someone that some action is to be taken. So we use the same process to require a signature, but also to inform someone that something has happened in the workflow. So this is integration with TDH, and yeah, as you can see, the integration with TDH. Again, this is just to recap again what we do with the workflows. Most processes are signed, so signatures, and it's the sub-process which I just showed you before. And then we can have as well some dynamic sub-process which basically do a loop over a collection and require to collect multiple signatures. And then at the end, we typically have a transfer to an ERP system or a material management system to finalize our workflow. Some of our parameters, this is, the signature is the role which needs to sign, so group leader or safety officer, etc. We have options to force someone to resign, not resign. Check leave as well, so sometimes we don't want to check if the person is absent, so if you want that the Deputy General of CERN signs the document, we don't want to bypass to someone else. So in that case, we always force him to sign. There can also be a delay before which the document doesn't get expired. And of course, the exclusions, which where you can list all the conflicts of interest. So another very important aspect is to how to access document data. When we migrated everything from Beeple, this is what it looked like. So we used the JX path to evaluate our document data in Beeple. And yeah, it doesn't look very nice. We soon realized it was quite messy to do with this. So we decided to improve this, and now it looks like this. So how did you do this? The thing is, the doc variable you see in there, it doesn't even exist in our workflow. In fact, it's automatically injected into our into Activiti by something which I'll show you afterwards. So what you do is we actually extend. This is on the slide with code now, and we extend the Activiti process engine configuration from Spring, and we change a couple of bins there to allow us, for example, to provide our own expression manager, as you can see there, our own script binding factory, and as well to, for example, change the BPMN at runtime. So, for example, in this case, we are injecting a variable at runtime. So, even though it's not listed in every process, we inject it in every BPMN file at runtime. So, this is what we actually love about Activiti. That's this really good integration with Spring. Allows us to very easily plug in our own functionality and do sort of a magic thing, so put our own Groovy DSLs as to evaluate expressions in a very easy way. Of course, there's lots of code around there if you go in depth to the expression management, but this is typical Spring boilerplate code where you need to inherit and extend several different interfaces to make something work, but it's just how it works. It's also what allows it to be so much flexible to allow us to do this. So finally, some tooling and monitoring tools. So these are more or less our requirements for tooling and monitoring. So we have an option to restart workflows. We have sometimes users who forgot to put a comment when they shouldn't, or some documents just went to the wrong way, we need to restart it. This is very important for us. Sort of having a program counter so that we allow us to jump to certain steps in the workflow. Edit variables at runtime. This is sort of a naughty thing to do, but sometimes it's required. We have this request from users. As well as visualization of the process. So things such as what were the variables which were evaluated, what was the result of the evaluated expression, and what were the executed steps of the workflow, as well as a list of stuck documents. So this also evolved in time. So this is what we used to have with the Oracle workflow. As you can see, still using Netscape Navigator. And yeah, we saw the process as well, which steps were executed. We could see, for example, we could edit as well the variables in the browser, all the kind of things. Then we created our own from when we had ActiVoz. ActiVoz didn't have an admin console, let's say, so we had to roll out our own. We like to visualize processes as trees, not as diagrams for debugging purposes. For the user, of course, it's better to have an image. And this is how we visualize it, so we can see exactly where the workflow went and what was the information which was evaluated on every step of the workflow. And then finally, when we moved to Activiti, we also created a new improved version of the console. So again, we have the tree view, which you have in there. We have options to retry every step of the workflow. We can edit variables, we can reject, retry, we can fire timers if required, all those kind of things. And we also have a list of stuck document lists. So, for example, you can see here that at the top, some documents are stuck, they cannot advance. For example, in there, we can see that, for example, we couldn't evaluate the chemical property of material request. This happens every now and then because we buy items from an external supplier, and the way to determine if something is chemical or radioactive is through something which is called the UNSDC, it's United Nations Standard, which for certain codes defines if the material requires some chemical or radioactive isolation. We have also the person not found in there, and the person not found is very, very common. So what happens there is we have a role for which we don't have persons assigned to the role. Suppose someone comes to the organization and he still lacks a supervisor. So when we evaluate the supervisor there, there's no persons assigned. So what we do is we have someone working on second line support, which has to contact the person and ask the person to create this particular role. Then at last we have as well failed transfers, so sometimes the transfer just cannot pass through the external system. We get the message there, and someone also has to contact someone to make sure the transfer works. At last, for monitoring, for a very, very long time we've been using Introscope. It's a tool by IBM to do application performance management. This is a very powerful tool, I quite like it. It's quite cumbersome to configure, but it's very, very powerful. Very, very low latency in terms of the metrics we get from the agents in the GVM. Extraordinary tool. So we can see there, for example, all the things that, if all our nodes are up or down. And for the workflow, you can see, for example, if our daemon is up or down. We can see how many documents we have in our queue, pending processing, and the light turns green or yellow or red, depending on how many documents are in the queue. We have as well some information on how many stuck docs we have. So clearly we have too many stuck docs in there. Someone has to improve support. And we have as well status for the notification service. So if it's up, down, how many documents are in the queue, etc. And for example, the average load of documents per minute, per window per time. Unfortunately, this tool is quite expensive, and we have now moved to a new one by AppDynamics. So we're now trying to move out this dashboard to AppDynamics. It's a new kid on the block for application performance management, kind of like Splunk. And we're now migrating we're now forced to migrate this tool to AppDynamics. But in the end, it will look more or less like this. So we just need to plug in all these windows there, all the monitoring applications, put up all the agents, and everything should work like that at the end. So yeah, this kind of wraps it up. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I don't tweet that much, but I have a Twitter account. And you can also send me an email, and yeah, I'm really very happy to share anything you'd like by email. I'll be here all day as well, so talk to me. Thank you.